YouTube, Melvin Quant Geekery, and I'm looking at some images from the ICV2 site. It is the public site, so you can access this freely. And they have recently put up the 2022 comic sales report by channel. And the insight here is connecting with my broader themes on Wealth of Nations. This indicates a declining submarket, particularly, I guess you would consider it floppy comic book sales. They are a terminal decline. They're in a terminal market, and the main reason is Marvel and DC. But the reason that I make that conclusion is, first, comic stores have sold 735 million this year. The book channel for graphic novels, 1.23 billion. Digital downloads are okay. On its own, this doesn't mean that much. Comic book sales, 435 million. What this means is that there are 300 million graphic novel sales that were made in comic stores, whereas the book channel is basically, so 1.23 billion is the book channel, 1.57 billion is the total number. That basically means 300 million are coming from about a little over 300 million are coming from comic stores in terms of graphic novel sales, and then online, really, which is what they mean by other channels. So that 35 million is the other channels, and that's what rounded out to 1.57. Now, 435 million is not a small amount of money. There is, however, an issue. Back in 2021, comic stores sold 705 million. So there's a $35 million increase. The book channel sold 1.165. Digital downloads are a little bit higher. But here's where the problem is. Comic books only sold 435 million in 2021. So the sales were flat. For a while, I've said in my previous channels that there's an issue with Marvel and DC specifically using various gimmicks to keep the appearance of health. And many sites, many channels on YouTube have said the same thing, that these are the constant acceleration of events, renumberings. All of those things were not signs of long-term health. They were signs of a declining terminal market, if you're looking at it from an economic point of view. Particularly if we're thinking of a mine. If you continue digging in a mine, you reinvest in new equipment, after a point, it does not make economic sense, especially if the mine is something like, say, gold. And you would think, well, obviously you'd want to put all your money into digging up gold because you're literally digging up money. Unless you're looking at it, if you're from an individual perspective, perhaps. From an overall perspective, no. The purpose of digging up gold is, if you're looking at it in terms of money, is to buy things with the money. If all you're doing is getting more money to buy the same amount of things available, what happens is the price for things go up. This was exactly what happened with mining towns. The people who ended up getting rich in mining towns weren't the miners who dug up the gold. It was the people who had the food, the clothes, the shelter, and everything else in the town that those miners had to pay gold in order to use, whereas everywhere else people were able to get away with paper money. As a result, the miners were the ones who were investing the physical capital and the actual labor to produce gold. However, it was everyone else who were in charging grossly inflated prices who ended up actually getting wealthy. When it comes to comics, you have the intellectual property. That's essentially the gold. If you dig up too much of it too fast, the price for everything goes up. Marvel and DC, their old model was you train artists, they collaborate with writers, they get paid a fair amount of money, and they create new ideas for Marvel and DC, and they exploit them, and they make the billions and billions of dollars. That's the model. I think you've noticed what's happened lately. Mark Millar made Wanted, then he became very famous with DC, with Red Son. He became famous with Marvel, with Civil War, and then he went off on his own, and he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars now, and he has basically a $1 billion franchise with his own creative IP that doesn't have anything to do with Marvel or DC. Garth Ennis has a $1 billion franchise with The Boys. What's going on is that same idea that Marvel and DC, from a corporate perspective, see that the value of their IP is diminishing precisely because as more comic book creators are able to make those kinds of franchises like The Walking Dead, The Boys, I don't want to say Bodies is one. There are a few that have gone, that have taken off. Invincible, that's another one. There are actually a few that were independent comics that aren't, superhero related, but they're harder to remember if you don't know them. And what happened is the approach is if you get people that can't write and won't learn to write, and you pay them really, really low, you can guarantee that they don't end up creating the types of things that ultimately cost more money down the line, basically by taking up market share in things that are more valuable. In this case, if they hired creative people that were really good, they could end up jumping ship, coming up with bigger, bolder, more profitable ideas, and then those things get adapted, become $1 billion franchises in a market that's already saturated, and essentially destroying the profitability of the ideas that they already have. As a result, the comics themselves aren't that good, and the graphic novels, it's bad. It's bad for DC, but it's absolutely terrible for Marvel. This is what the overall sales are from Comics Beat for 2022. 50,000 titles, 52 million units sold, $833 million, $863 million. What this basically boils down to is the average sale is something like 14, something like that, right? If it's $10, it'll be 520 million. So then it's like, yeah, I'd say about $15, $16. DC sold about 1.5 million, a little under 1.5 million for 43 million. So given 1.4 times 3, 42, about $30 a piece. That's the price for a DC graphic novel. $30 on average. So there's a tilt towards the more expensive end, since their normal graphic novels are usually 19. DC makes up 6% of Western publishers by quantity, not by dollars. Again, this is Comics Beat. But if we were looking at it by dollars, Marvel and DC would be a lot closer. However, for Marvel, they sold 930,000 at 31 million. This is almost, um, ouch. Yeah. So, huh. So 9.3, okay, times 3, 27.9. So you're still off by 3.5. So I would say about $33 per comic. So DC is about 30, Marvel's about 33. That does indicate that Marvel is tilting with even more expensive graphic novels, which doesn't make sense because the normal price for a Marvel graphic novel is the same or slightly less in terms of their more current stuff, which brings to the next stage of what the sales look like in terms of the graphic novels based on the Comic-Con data. And if you look at the Comic-Con data, Marvel is, as of 2021, before they left, and so there's no more information for them, they are tilted. Most of their sales are for comics that are priced over $100. So in terms of their total sales volume, notional, basically half of their dollars are coming from comics priced over $99 and above. So essentially, Marvel gets half of their money from omnibus sales. More than half of it, as of 2021, based on what was released to Comic-Con before they stopped reporting altogether. And if we look at what it looked like in 2019, it was still, Marvel was still a little bit more heavily priced in that direction. But at that point, it really was only about 20%. Like, it wasn't even 25% of their money was coming from omnibuses. But in just 2 years, they were able to increase their sales, but almost all of it was coming from omnibus sales. Which means that their real sales for normal comics, it was static or flat. What this is saying is Marvel has been in a declining state for some time, and DC is following in that direction, not because not necessarily because they have to in terms of their comic sales, but they are doing it more for the multimedia sales. That if they hire too many creators that go on their own and they get that necessary traction, then they end up needing to compete with creatives. Like Marvel had that problem with artists back in the 90s. They are now dealing with that with the Substack exodus. Some of them are coming back. You have DC, they are actually still recovering from Tynion walking out, and the decision to just bring in the leftovers from Marvel are that Gotham War arc is terrible, and the events are only going to get more obnoxious until something breaks, which cyclically is very likely going to happen because it's going to become more expensive to finance debt. Marvel's parent company, Disney, is going to start tightening down financially as they have to refinance. Warner Brothers Discovery is going to tighten the ship, and then they're going to probably sell Warner Brothers to another conglomerate that's going to essentially harvest them for parts. That is the main reason that you're not seeing the pay go up. paying quality young writers and teaching them the craft so that they can develop their own original ideas wherever they find it and become creator owned innovators is not a thing that Marvel or DC really want at this stage. Because doing that lowers the value of their 50, 60, 80-year-old properties. You can only mine so much at a time. All right. Have a great one. Bye.